Once your unit is unpacked, you can begin to make all the necessary connections to get it up and running. With your air source in place, connect the 1/8 inch tubing from your regulator to the air in push fitting. Make sure to give it a little tug to ensure it's seated properly. Next, take your Ethernet cable included in the accessories kit and connect it to the LAN port on the front panel of your unit and computer. On the back of the controller, plug in the included power cable. Next, you will need to connect the exhaust air out port to the exhaust port on the mixing valve manifold. Cut a piece of 1/8 inch tubing included with the unit to desired length and connect it to the exhaust air out fitting. Once in, take the other end and insert it into the exhaust port on the underside of the mixing valve manifold. You'll now need to connect the final valve to the vial circuit board using the included DB9 connector. Take the DB9 connector and attach it to underneath the mixing valve. Once seated properly, take the other end and connect it to the blue cable coming from the final valve. Now that the final valve is connected to the controller, you'll need to connect the air and scent tubing. Cut the included 1/8 inch Teflon tubing to desired length depending on the distance needed from olfactometer to final valve location. Using the provided 3-piece inert fittings, slide the threaded piece over the tubing. Then slide the O-ring on. And finally, insert the nipple inside the tubing. Once assembled, screw the tubing into the air port of the final valve, taking caution not to over-tighten, as these fittings can break easily. Take the other end and insert it into the air push fitting on top of the mixing valve manifold. Repeat these steps for the scent line. The system is all set up and ready to use, but what if you want to expand the number of vials? The 220A base unit includes 4 vials, but here I will walk you through how to install an add-on module to expand to 8 total. Repeating this process for up to 2 more modules makes the unit expandable to up to 16 total odorants. On the left is your 4 odor base unit, which can be expanded to 8 using an add-on module here. First thing that needs to be done is removing the mixing valve assembly. To do this, remove the thumb screws holding the mounting plate in place. Then, using 2 hands, slide the plate out carefully. Once removed, unplug the cable connected to the circuit board and set aside. Take your add-on module and mount it to the base unit, ensuring the DB9 connection is made between them. Once attached, reattach the thumb screws to hold the unit in place. Now that the modules are connected, we need to attach the 1/16 inch dilution and odor tubing between the 2 vial manifolds. Take the 1/16 inch inert fitting and assemble as previously shown. Then screw an odor line fitting to the valve manifold and repeat this for the dilution line. Once that is complete, you'll need to reattach the mixing valve manifold to the end of the unit. Connect the blue cable to the connector on the valve circuit board. Then slide the mixing valve plate into place, ensuring the DB9 connection is made. Then reattach the thumb screws to secure it in place. Depending on the odorant used in your olfaction research, as well as the experimental paradigm, special care may need to be taken to replace odorant in the vials. Here, I will demonstrate 3 common methods for doing so. Method 1 involves unscrewing the cap from the vial. Once the cap is removed, insert your odorant of choice. When finished, replace the cap and vial. Note that all 3 methods being shown are for the same odor. If you'd like to use a new odor, this requires a new vial and tubing. Method 2 requires you to unscrew the threaded connectors from the vial manifold. Once disconnected, remove the vial with the cap and tubing together. This method is intended for odors that cannot be exposed to the animal testing area and thus need to be done in a different room or under a fume hood. In a fume hood, remove the cap, insert your odorant, and replace the cap. Bring the assembled vial back to your olfactometer and reattach the threaded connectors to the vial manifold. Method 3 is the simplest and allows you to top up your odorant using a syringe. Simply insert a thin gauge hypodermic needle into the cap septum, release the odorant, and remove. When removed, the septum will self-seal. Although the system employs Teflon tubing and constant airflow to limit odorants from sticking around in the system, after a period of time the tubing will need to be replaced, especially when taking into account the volatility of the odorants used. Follow along to learn how to replace vial, manifold, and final valve tubing lines to ensure there is no cross-contamination in the system. Unscrew the threaded connectors for the vial tubing being replaced. Then, remove the cap and tubing assembly from the vial. Replace the cap and tubing with a prefabricated vial cap assembly. Install the vial and reattach the threaded connectors as previously shown. If your unit does not include pre-made caps and tubing, I will show you how to do this next. Unscrew the threaded connectors and remove the previous cap and tubing as shown. Cut your 1/16 inch tubing to required length by matching it up with the previous tubing for both the dilution and odor lines and attach the inert fittings. The longer tubing attaches to the dilution line and the shorter to the odor line. Set those aside and find a new clean vial. With the included metal tube, Insert it through the cap septum. Then take your tubing and insert it. Slide the tubing all the way through to ensure that it is within the vial. Then slide the tubing all the way through and out. Repeat this same process for the second length of tubing. Once the tubing is through, ensure that the shorter piece of tubing slides further into the vial and the longer tubing remains higher up as to pick up the headspace and not the liquid. Attach the cap and tubing assembly to the new vial and reinstall onto the vial manifold. Next, we need to replace the tubing connecting the vial manifolds for any 8, 12, or 16 channel units. Measure and cut a length of 1/16 inch tubing, and then remove previous threaded connectors and tubing. Keep in mind that you can reuse the connectors if so desired, but depending on the volatility, you should consider using new ones. Attach the fittings to the new tubing as shown previously. Then reattach the threaded fittings to the vial manifold for both the dilution and odor lines. Repeat this process for any other tubing, including the mixing valve and final valve, to prevent cross-contamination.